The PonoPlayer and PonoMusic company raised over $13 million, and the company itself was valued at $50 million. But in less than 4 years, it was all gone. Was the PonoPlayer any good? Was it snake oil? Did something else cause its demise? That's what we're going to find out today. Hey everyone, how are you all doing? If you're new here, welcome. My name is Krazy Ken, and today we're taking a look at this lovely triangular prism. But before we learn more about the Pono ecosystem, we should learn about the person who was behind it. Neil Young. Neil was born on November 12, 1945 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Throughout his childhood, he listened to a lot of music, rock and roll, country, R&B, and Elvis. He also learned to play the ukulele. In 1963, Neil dropped out of school and embarked on his music career, and he formed his first band, the Squires. Well, second band if you count the Jades, which he formed during his school years. In 1966, Neil moved to LA, where he formed the folk rock group Buffalo Springfield, and it was quite the hit. Unfortunately, the band broke up shortly after in 1968, but Neil pressed on. Over the years, he, along with other musicians, released many albums. Not all were hits, but many were critically acclaimed, like Deja Vu, which was released by the band Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And we can't forget about Harvest. By 2012, Neil Young produced 44 albums. Sleeps with Angels, Mirrorball, and Greendale were some of the most notable later releases, and on the more political side, Living with War. Neil received multiple awards for his work, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Twice. Outside of his music, Neil directed some films, and he was involved in some environmentalist and humanitarian efforts, such as founding Farm Aid in 1985. So now we arrive at Neil's next big project. For years, Neil defended his stance regarding the flaws of digital music files sold online. He claimed they don't provide the rich, warm sound that analog recordings provided. In fact, Neil has compared the difference between digital and analog to taking a shower in tiny ice cubes instead of ordinary water. In some interviews, Neil continued expressing his concern about digital audio files, declaring, "My goal is to try and rescue the art form that I've been practicing for the past 50 years. However, some critics were skeptical of these concerns. Some questioned whether or not a person could hear the high-resolution difference in the first place. And on a more technical level, high-res music files are about 16 times the size as a normal music file. But Neil didn't stop at merely expressing his concerns. He was going to do something about them. Neil quietly founded a new company in 2010 named PureTone, and his goal with this company was to restore an art form and protect the original art while serving the music lover. But PureTone wasn't just a fancy camel case name for a company. It was envisioned as a new, high-quality audio format similar to Apple Lossless, FLAC, and WAVE. In addition, PureTone was also going to be the brand name for a new portable music player and service, designed to merge the best of both worlds, higher quality music and the convenience that consumers want. This upcoming music player would also support people's existing libraries. So even if you didn't have PureTone specific recordings, the files would still work on the new player. And Neil claimed that they would sound better because of the new player's enhanced digital to analog conversion technology. It's the DAC. Neil also said PureTone will force iTunes to be better and to improve quality at a faster pace, and that MP3s have about 5% of the data that you would find in a PureTone master file, or even a vinyl record. Neil seemed really confident in this vision. Hopefully it would work out. To try and prove his point, Neil introduced a feature named Revealer, which lets a listener take a PureTone recording and degrade the quality to CD or MP3, so the listener can hear the difference. So Neil had a vision for the format, the player, and the service, but what's one key thing that's missing still? The music! To reap the benefits of this PureTone player, record labels would have to release high-res recordings of their music. This was a tough mountain to climb. Neil was cautioned by many about the strength of Apple and iTunes, which garnered 70% of the US digital music download market at the time. According to Neil, people were scared of Apple and were worried about their businesses if they were to provoke them. Actually, Neil reached out to Apple and even their CEO at the time, Steve Jobs. But unfortunately, Steve passed away before the two were able to meet in person. It's worth mentioning Neil wasn't against Apple. In fact, when one of his friends asked him if he was making war on Apple, Neil replied saying, "No, I'm waging heavy peace." So in the middle of 2011, in a non-war fashion, Neil proceeded bringing PureTone to life, and Craig Kallman, chairman of Atlantic Records, invested with him and helped assemble a team. This team included reps from Meridian Audio and Dolby, two huge companies in the audio space. At this time, Warner Music already released high-res versions of its catalogs, and Kallman and Young approached Sony and Universal about doing the same thing. "Excuse me, princess, you can't use the name PureTone, it's already taken." "Cool it, Mr. Lawyer, we'll just call it PureTone 2. Okay, we need to think of a new name. Bill, what do you got? The team settled on the new name Pono, derived from a Hawaiian word meaning righteous and good. 9 months later, Neil showed the world its first look at the new PonoMusic Hardware when he revealed a prototype on The Late Show with David Letterman. Then, on March 10th, 2014, PonoMusic sent out a press release which revealed the official name for their upcoming product, PonoPlayer. The press release also revealed the final design, which was made in collaboration with Air Acoustics. And yeah, the talks of a Meridian partnership fizzled out. But hey, I think it looks pretty cool. It's like an iPod and a Toblerone bar had a baby. And mini spoiler alert, the blue version that was in the press release, that ended up not coming out. But hey, we now know the retail price, $399. And speaking of money, PonoMusic needed more of it to finalize the player's design. And where did PonoMusic and Neil Young turn for that extra funding? Kickstarter. You probably know where this is going. If we bust out a Venn diagram here, if a product was on Kickstarter and it's also on this show, chances are something went wrong. We'll take a look at their Kickstarter in a moment, but right now I'm amused by this line at the top of chapter 27 in Neil's autobiography. And now, another word from our sponsor, PureTone. Except for me, my sponsor is not PureTone, it's Helix. Et voila! Here it is! I'm gonna hit you with a surprising fact. 100% of people sleep. Okay, that maybe wasn't so surprising, but I'm sure most people don't really think about how much time they actually spend on a mattress. 1/3 of your entire life is spent in bed, so why compromise on your mattress? You deserve the best. That's where Helix steps in. Helix makes and ships premium mattresses to your door, and they have 20 to choose from. All I had to do was take a simple quiz, and there you have it. I was matched with a Helix Midnight mattress. I like that Helix offers this quiz and a variety of mattresses, because everyone's body is different. And it was a perfect match. When I first laid on this thing, I just instinctively let out an audible whoa. It is so comfy. I've been testing it more lately, and I love sleeping on it. I first received this mattress back when I did my CDI episode, and I've been using it more ever since. I love it. Also, my friend Looney Luke and I hosted a live stream a while ago, and it went on so late into the night that he had to crash in my lair. Being the generous host that I am, I let him sleep on the Helix mattress, and he liked it too. And the cherry on top is, the shipping is free, and Helix gives you a 120-night sleep trial and a lifetime warranty. So thank you Helix Sleep for sponsoring. Visit helixsleep.com/computerclan to take advantage of their spring savings event, 20% off site-wide. And my friend Sonic loves it too. Geez, Sonic, use a bed sheet. What, were you born in a barn? Actually, you probably were, come to think of it. So click the link in the description and enjoy a good night's sleep with Helix. Alright, let's take a look at the PonoMusic Kickstarter. On March 11th, 2014, PonoMusic publicly revealed the PonoPlayer at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. On the same day, they launched a Kickstarter campaign with a goal of $800,000. The campaign page reinforces Neil's vision to provide the best possible listening experience with digital music. It also shows details about the PonoPlayer's development, history, and the core team behind the project. They even describe one of the early concepts for the player. It was an accessory used alongside a smartphone, but this idea was scrapped. As for the pitch video, it's 11.5 minutes long, which is probably the longest Kickstarter pitch video I've ever seen. And even though it's not shot with award-winning cinematography, I will say the pitch video got me excited. The video shows many music lovers and big-name artists praising the superior sound quality of the PonoPlayer compared to other devices and MP3s. It featured testimonials from Eddie Vedder, Tom Petty, Dave Matthews, James Taylor, Elvis Costello, and many others. The Kickstarter tiers offered $99 to $199 discounts on the retail price, and there were also several Artist Signature Series PonoPlayers available for $400. Everything looked promising, but of course, people had to share their opinions, right? Overall, the press, at least from my assessment, seemed very skeptical. And it's not like they were questioning a higher quality music player device. That wasn't necessarily the problem. It was more about the viability of this product in the market. After all, it was a standalone music player in a market where standalone music players are declining and smartphones and streaming services are getting really popular. It could be a challenge. I say let's just push those theories aside and see how the public reacts. Holy shiitake mushrooms! They raised $1 million in 12 hours. Okay, clearly people want their own pony. The campaign ended on April 15th with 18,220 backers, raising $6.2 million, surpassing their goal by almost 8 times. That means PonoMusic was the #3 most funded Kickstarter in history at the time, coming in behind the Ouya and the Pebble smartwatch. Oh, interesting. I did episodes on those two products as well. You should watch those next. But Pono wanted to take things further and give people an opportunity to own part of the company. Throughout August, Pono turned to crowdfunder to raise additional funds. But unlike Kickstarter, where you make a pledge and essentially pre-order an item, crowdfunder was investor-oriented. This platform allowed investors to give Pono money, and in exchange, those investors would receive equity in the business, which at the time was valued at $50 million. By the end of August, Pono raised an additional $6.8 million, bringing the crowdfunding total to over $13 million. It seemed like they had all the money they needed now, because mass production started on October 7th, 2014, which means they're on track to hit their pre-order deadline. Nice job. As for the rest of the public, orders opened up on January 6th, 2015, and everything started shipping in February. And of course, I went ahead and bought one. On eBay, 11 years later, but I still bought one. And I know what you're thinking. Is the PonoPlayer sound quality actually that good? Can you hear a difference between the PonoPlayer and, say, a smartphone or another Apple device? It's a good question. I'm curious about that too. So, I voluntold CloneKen to conduct an experiment and give several test subjects a chance to listen to a specific portion of one song on the PonoPlayer, then on an iPad. The iPad's file will be a lower res MP3 file, and the Pono's file will be in high res. Both devices will be tested with the same pair of Sennheiser HD650 headphones. These are $330 open back headphones, so I think they will be suitable for high res listening. And CloneKen will be taking it a step further. He's going to use balanced cables with these headphones and the balanced mode on the PonoPlayer. I'll explain what that means in detail later, but basically, it's the best way to get the highest quality output possible. The test subject will not be aware of what hardware they're listening on. Only CloneKen will know. After listening to both, the subject will be asked if they prefer option A, PonoPlayer, option B, iPad, or if they have no preference. I thought for a few days what song I should use for the test, and then I finally decided Hotel California. And after this test is complete with the volunteers, I will personally test the PonoPlayer too, because I want to know what it sounds like. But while CloneKen is conducting the experiment, let's take a closer look at the hardware itself. Behold, the PonoPlayer Model NY001 in all its triangular glory. I think the yellow looks best, but there was also a black version in addition to the chrome versions we saw earlier. Although I originally thought the design was goofy, it has grown on me.
It's an interesting design. I'm not too keen on the design.
In my opinion, the triangular shape helps it stand out, and it helps the screen face the user when it's laid flat. I also just have a thing for long electronics. That's not weird, is it? The triangle design also has technical benefits, at least according to Pono. It allows for larger audio components to fit and be spaced far enough apart to prevent interference, and it allows for a large cylindrical battery. On the front are the playback and volume controls, plus a touchscreen which works with an accelerometer for portrait and landscape orientations. And on the bottom is the micro USB port and micro SD card slot. The PonoPlayer actually shipped with a 64GB micro SD card, so you could put different libraries on different cards and then just swap them depending on what you wanted to listen to. Also, internally there's 64GB of storage. This 64GB built-in storage could hold about 600 FLAC tracks at 192 kHz sample rate and 24-bit audio depth. I'll explain what these fancy numbers mean soon, but for now just keep in mind, bigger number means higher quality. On top we have the word Pono and a blue light. This light turns on when a high-res PonoMusic file is playing. And beneath the logo are two 1/8" 3.5mm audio jacks. One is for headphones, and one is for line-level output for connecting to other amplified equipment, like a home or car stereo system. And here's a neat feature. If you want to listen to music with your friend, you can turn on PonoShare, and then both jacks function as stereo headphone jacks. And if you really want to get fancy, you can turn on balanced mode, and use both jacks with balanced equipment and cables. By using two conductors instead of just one, the receiving device can cancel out interference. This allows me to drive more power to my headphones and increase the sound quality without inadvertently amplifying unwanted noise in the signal. There's much more to this subject, so if you want to learn more about balanced versus unbalanced audio, check out this link in the description. The only thing I don't like about the design is what it's made out of. When I saw a photo of it the first time, I thought it was plastic, but it's actually silicone or some sort of rubbery material, and normally I would be fine with that. But this type of material deteriorates with age, and it gets kind of sticky. I knew it. I should have sprung for the chrome version. Everything's chrome in the future. But the wood box it comes in? Now that is very nice. Now, let's take a look at the specs. The PonoPlayer features custom-designed audio circuitry made by Air Acoustics. And at the heart of this circuitry is an, deep breath, an ESS Technology ES9018K2M DAC chip. Nailed it. This DAC can handle up to 384 kHz sample rates with up to 32 bits per channel. This DAC was combined with a Texas Instruments OPA 4376 amp too. Plenty of audio horsepower in a tiny package. And the battery lasts up to 8 hours on a full charge. Those are the specs that the PonoPlayer has. But what about the specs that it doesn't have? No matter how hard you look, you won't find any form of wireless communication, which makes sense for the type of device this is. On the software level, it was pretty simple. The PonoPlayer ran a modified version of Android 2.3 Gingerbread, and navigation was easy enough. You could use the touchscreen and the physical controls, which are nice because no matter where you are in the software, the physical controls will always be there for volume and playback. And although the aforementioned PureTone format never came to fruition, PonoPlayer supported other standard formats, such as FLAC, ALEC, WAVE, AIF, MP3, and AAC, and in a future firmware update, DSD. I know this sounds like alphabet soup, but I swear these are all real things. Groovy. So before we move on to the PonoMusic store, let's break down some of the technical stuff. We heard the acronym DAC several times today, but what does it mean? It stands for Digital to Analog Converter. There's also devices which work in the opposite direction, known as analog to digital converters. When a sound emits from an instrument or person's voice, the sound waves are being produced naturally. They are analog. The production of these sounds does not involve the use of digital technology like a computer. However, the world runs on a lot of digital tech, so we need to store this sound in a digital file format so it can be used later during playback, mixing, etc. When receiving an analog audio signal, the ADC converts the signal into a stream of ones and zeros, which make up the digital audio signal. The process also works in the opposite direction, which makes playback over headphones or a speaker possible. These digital audio signals can be recorded into a digital file format. In music and digital audio in general, these files are measured with sample rate, bit depth, and bit rate. A sample in a digital music file is the smallest measurable part of a song. Think of it like a frame in a movie. In film, 24 of these frames play per second, and the viewer sees a continuous movie. In digital music, at a standard sample rate of 44.1 kHz, your device plays 44,100 tiny, inaudible pieces of a song per second. And when they are played in sequence, the result is continuous audible playback. Keep in mind there's multiple factors during the recording and mixing stages that will affect sound quality, but generally speaking, a higher sample rate potentially allows for higher quality music in the higher frequencies of a song. Bit depth also plays an important role. It determines the resolution of each individual sample. The more bits per sample, the more dynamic range is present, which is the difference between the quietest possible sound in a sample and the loudest possible sound in a sample. Higher bit depths can potentially result in higher quality music, and conversely, lower bit depths may result in lower quality, especially if the bit depth is too low. You will notice a lot more noise and distortion. And finally, bitrate, not to be confused with bit depth, is the amount of bits in 1 second of audio. For example, 128 kilobits per second is 128,000 bits per second. Higher bit rates potentially allow for higher quality music, but the files now occupy a lot of storage space, which can sometimes be a problem. To save space, more compression is used, which results in a lower bit rate. Lower bit rates will allow for more music to be stored in that same amount of space, but at a potentially lower level of quality. For the most part, 256 kilobits per second is acceptable for a digital music file, especially from a streaming service. It's a good balance between quality and saving storage space. Sound is a beautiful yet complicated beast, but I think in terms of a digital context, that sums it up pretty well without going too far down the rabbit hole.
The what hole?
Relax, Z, it's just an idiom.
Wait, did you just call me an idiot?
Z, go back to Twitch. Now, we can't have a high-res music player without high-res music, right? If a user already had a library of high-res files, they can just transfer them to the player or the card, and it will work. But for convenience, Pono also launched their own music store. The PonoMusic Store sold DRM-free high-resolution music in the FLAC format, and it was powered by Omniphone's Music Station platform. All the major record labels supported the store, including independent labels. And at launch, Pono had 2 million tracks available across many albums. So how do you manage all of this music on your PonoPlayer? If you want, you can simply use your computer's file manager, and you can copy files to the player or to the microSD card. But Pono also had their own management software in addition to the store. Say hello to PonoMusic World. It's like Pac-Man World, but it's not. This is a media player and management software based on JRiver Media Center, and it ran on macOS and Windows. You can manage all your music inside the World app, and you can also sync it to your PonoPlayer. There's also a conversion feature built in which offers different formats and compression levels. I know this is a beta version of the software, but I cannot for the life of me find a version that is not in beta. In fact, I don't think it ever came out of beta. And it kind of feels like that too. Some parts are a little clunky and unpolished, and the lack of standard Mac menus drives me crazy, but it's not the worst software in the world. So now that we have this whole Pono ecosystem coming together, what did people think of it? Like many new things, Pono received mixed reviews upon launch. But keep in mind, this happened with the iPod too. Companies are not 100% free of criticism, especially when trying new things. Stereophile praised the device, and Leo Laporte from Twit did too, although he was more critical of the price tag and the desktop software. Opposing views came from people like Sam from Ars Technica, David Pogue from Yahoo Tech, and Linus Tech Tips from Linus Tech Tips. They largely panned PonoPlayer as snake oil. David Pogue even went the extra mile and conducted his own test with volunteers, but hey, wait a minute, I'm not gonna look into those results yet, because my own test is still running, and it's actually about to wrap up. One of the other issues was the lack of high-res music. Yeah, I know that kind of sounds silly with the mission of this whole thing, but of the 2 million tracks that were on the PonoMusic Store, 90% of them were 44.1 kilohertz CD quality. That means only 10% were actually higher resolution than a CD. There was also a lack of classical music, and that baffled critics. Don't worry, critics, I'm a trained cellist. I'll play some classical music for you. Wait, am I even holding this thing right? But criticism isn't the end-all be-all. What's more important is what the numbers say. Within the first year, PonoPlayer sold 25,000 units. To me, that number by itself is impressive. Come on, it's hard to start a business, so I respect those sales. And I don't have an exact number, but hardware aside, Pono sold hundreds of thousands of music tracks by August 2015. It seemed like things were off to a good start, but unfortunately, sales slowed down. But I can't go any further until I see those test results. So, let's take a look at those, and then I will test this thing for myself. Of the 9 people I tested, 1 had no preference, 3 chose the iPad, and 5 chose the PonoPlayer. Most people chose the higher resolution playback, so I believe this indicates at least some people can hear the difference. Alright, I've been waiting for this. It's time to see what I think. Alright, let's try this puppy out. And here we go. Whoa. Okay. After testing this thing for a while, my initial thought was, wow, I've been listening to music wrong my entire life. Believe me, I still love my other headphones and Apple devices, but the PonoPlayer makes a difference. Even without a high-res music file, the DAC in the PonoPlayer sounds better, and the high-res masters just take it further. Sometimes it's hard to describe sound. It's just something you have to hear. But to put it into words, the better quality sounds like I'm standing a little closer to the actual band. I can hear the space where the instruments are playing. It sounds more like they are in a room with me. Especially the drums, I can hear that extra oomph in the percussion. And when I switch back to my iPad or iPhone, it still sounds pretty good, but everything just feels... the instruments and the vocals just feel a little more squished together, and they're not as distinct and powerful as they are on the PonoPlayer. For fun, I also tried comparing the Pono and iPad's DACs with my Bose QC headphones, which have active noise canceling, and I could not tell the difference. I didn't expect to hear a difference because of the processing with the noise cancellation, but with these open-back Sennheiser HD650s, which I would say are more true to the sound without altering it, I could hear the difference much more easily, which brings up the point of, if you're comparing players, you need to make sure you're using the right headphones that work for you and your ears. And in my particular case, this combination works great. But as for the PonoMusic company as a whole, things were not so great. In fact, things were getting pretty rough. Unfortunately, the slow sales were just the beginning of Pono's troubles. They were now faced with some bad luck they would have to overcome. On May 4th, 2016, Omniphone, the company that owned the platform the PonoMusic Store runs on, entered administration due to insolvency. In UK law, that means your company can't pay its liabilities, and now the government assigns a manager to help get your ducks in a row. So, Omniphone looked for a buyer. Buy us, we have cool stuff, they maybe said, and they found a buyer in only 2 weeks. The buyer was an American tech company, and it wasn't a full acquisition, but they did acquire some of Omniphone's talent, tech, and a license to their patents for $10 million. The buyer's identity was not initially disclosed, but it wound up being Apple. But it's likely another buyer, or buyers, acquired other Omniphone assets too, such as patents. During this purchase, Omniphone's relationship with Pono was terminated, according to Pono's under construction message on their website. Because of this unfortunate termination, Pono had to temporarily shut down the store on July 20th, about a year and a half after the PonoPlayer launched publicly. But Neil and Pono weren't ready to give up. It's time to shift gears. During the shutdown period, Pono announced they would transition to a new platform, 7 Digital. Their announcement said the transition would take several weeks to complete. Several weeks went by, and nothing. okay, maybe they were ready to give up. Less than a year later, on April 22, 2017, Daniell announced he was discontinuing the PonoPlayer and the PonoMusic Store. Daniell blamed record companies for charging 2 to 3 times more for high-res tracks, and in an interview 10 months later, he said that all music should cost the same, and that high-res files don't cost any more to transfer. I can understand why Daniell is upset, but from a technical perspective, he doesn't know what he's talking about. To host that stuff, you now need 16 times the storage and 16 times the bandwidth. Storage and bandwidth cost money. Despite the discontinuations, Daniell announced a collaboration with AuraStream to create Xstream, a high-res streaming service which would replace Pono's earlier download-based model. However, those plans were also abandoned, and like a fragrant bath bomb, the PonoMusic Company was dissolved on December 29th, 2017. But Xstream might find life somewhere else. So, PonoPlayer lasted for about 2.5 years after the public launch, which means the Pono Company lasted for 6 years in total. This mission, this movement to save people from compressed music files seemed pretty short-lived. So, why did the PonoPlayer and PonoMusic Company fail? For starters, the software had user interface and user experience issues. From my own testing and from interviewing other owners, I have concluded the software isn't the greatest. And Pono outsourcing the underlying tech for the critical store component of their ecosystem was also not the greatest move. The second problem, Pono was in a very tough market. I harped on this earlier, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but one additional piece of information I would like to address has to do with the health of the music player market. From 2008 to 2014, Apple went from selling 54.8 million iPods in a year, making up about 25% of their revenue, down to only 14.4 million and 1% of revenue. This steep decline was a warning sign. Either Pono was oblivious to this fact and this data, or they were so confident in their product that they decided to risk it for the biscuit. Third problem, the value proposition fell flat. I believe Daniell saw himself as the user base for this product, but in reality, that's not the case. Of course, there's many audio enthusiasts out there, and I've had a fun time talking with some lately. But people who are used to streaming music and using their smartphones aren't necessarily audio enthusiasts. They will likely not be able to hear the quality difference between the PonoPlayer and the smartphone they're used to carrying around every day. Even in David Pogue's test, most people preferred the audio playback from the iPhone over the PonoPlayer. However, he did not use balanced audio from the PonoPlayer, so I wonder if that would have made a difference. That aside, his results are almost the opposite of mine, interestingly. And when you put them together, it's nearly a tie. Okay, I know a statistician will hate me for doing this, but come on, I'm trying my best here. Truthfully, at the end of the day, there is no perfect test for something like this, and no matter how you set it up, you're not going to be able to please everyone. And to many users, I imagine the convenience of smartphones and music streaming services outweighs the additional cost and time investment needed to enter the world of high-res music, despite the quality advantages. But here's something that surprises me. High-res audio players and music stores are still around today. Streaming services offer high-res audio now too, so there's clearly enough demand for high-res music. If that stuff can survive, why couldn't the PonoPlayer? Daniell and his team had some great ideas, but I think the Pono ecosystem's execution was not fully dialed in. And sufficient marketing wasn't in place to educate people who aren't audio enthusiasts on how to benefit from this Pono ecosystem. Which leads us to the fourth issue. And there is one important detail in this story that I haven't mentioned yet, because I thought it would be best to save it for now. For the most part, Pono did not have a CEO. John Hamm, who had a wealth of prior business experience, became the CEO in May 2013. But in a Kickstarter update from July 10th, 2014, it was announced that John would be stepping down, about 3 months before the Pono ecosystem is set to launch to Kickstarter backers. So who took over? It was Daniell. Daniell is great at many things, but CEO experience is not on his resume. But Pono probably had no other choice. They tried looking for a new CEO for quite some time, but they couldn't find anyone. And in a Facebook post from August 2015, Neil admitted that Pono has no proven business leader at the head of the company. This lack of leadership likely meant critical issues at the company weren't being fixed. And when bombshells like the Omniphone situation happened, there was no proper course correction in place. Despite the poorly managed Pono business, I think the PonoPlayer product itself is good. I enjoy using it, and one thing Neil and his team did a good job at was making the player future-proof. Even though the PonoMusic store and software were discontinued years ago, the player still functions perfectly with music files from virtually any source. After the Pono shutdown, Neil continued with his music and tours, and he launched the Neil Young Archives website in 2017, which is still running today. This is where Xstream found new life. This technology powers the high-res music streaming on the Neil Young Archives. And I love seeing skeuomorphism in a user interface. Very nice. As of 2026, Neil has produced over 70 albums. And it appears Pono had an impact on the music industry, because streaming services are now offering high-res music. And when Amazon Music HD launched, Neil actually praised it, saying, "Now it will be possible for you to feel all my records the way I made them, in their highest resolution. I always knew this day would come." Things don't always work out, but I was hoping something good would come out of this, and I'm glad it did. I always try to look at the positive side, you know? Now, if you don't mind, I have some jams to catch up on. Catch the Krazy and pass it on. Oh my gosh, Darude Sandstorm sounds so good on this. Hang on, you have to have a listen.